Welcome everyone to the SciManDan Podcast, the place where science and conspiracy collide. I told myself I was going to do that a little less enthusiastic because normally every week I'm like, welcome to the SciManDan Podcast. I tried to turn it down a bit today. Hope you're all well. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, he is here again. My ever-loyal co-host. He once thought that a meteor shower was standing under a never-ending stream of quarter-pounders. It's Catz. How you doing?
I'm doing no jingle this week, mate.
Oh, yeah,
no
sorry.
Jingle.
Do you know what?
That's all I call for, my jingle. So...
Do you know, I've been. Do you know what? Last week where we messed up on the music for the game, it was there the whole time, and I pressed 7 buttons out of 8, and the one I didn't press was the music that we were supposed to use, and I thought I'd messed up the thing. So my head's gone with the buttons. So. How you doing, mate? Anyway, you all right?
Yeah, I'm really good. Really, really good. Really looking forward to this one tonight. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so before we get into it, you've had a bit of a run-in with the Flat Earther Nathan, haven't you, with a debate. Do you want to tell us about that? Yeah,
well, for those people who, I think most people listening know who Nathan Oakley is, but he's a man who tells porcupines on the internet about the Earth being flat and takes money off people for doing it and educates them in his own sort of pseudoscience, I suppose, which links to tonight's podcast. So he was contacted by a guy out of New Zealand whose podcast is hosted by a website. It's like the main news website in New Zealand, gets over 1 million hits a day, and his podcast is hosted on there. And he said, "Do you want to come on, and if I can get a scientist to come on and actually debate you about the flat Earth, so you can show your ideas, would you do it?" He said, "Yeah." He jumped at it. He replied within 10 minutes and said, "I'm all in." And then I was the next person to get the email saying, "Oh, this guy Nathan Oakley, I believe you know him." Has agreed to the debate. Will you do it? And then, funnily enough, the answer was no. He doesn't want to do it anymore.
He pulled out when he found out it was you, didn't he? But this guy,
pulled out when he found out it was me. Yeah.
He's quite big in New Zealand, isn't he? He's done a lot of TV work and.
He in the past. He was I forget the name of the radio station.
Yeah, it was a big radio station in New Zealand.
Yeah. He was like a national radio presenter.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So he's got a lot of history.
It was so interesting. Stuff. It was so interesting because obviously this Nathan is awful on his show, and he never backs out of debates. Come and debate me if you want. And then it just made me laugh. The second he found out it was you, he's tucked his tail and he's ran it. It was brilliant to hear. Anyway, should we get our guest on?
Let's do it.
Cool. So joining us this week is podcaster, author, presenter, journalist, and general science communicator. There's not much more we can attribute to her skill set. I think it's Cara Santa Maria. Welcome and thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey guys.
Are you right?
I'm great. I'm alive.
You're alive.
I'm hanging in there.
We're all doing well, aren't we? We're all
quite a time.
We're all I think just to be here now and chatting and laughing is a bonus, I think.
Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning, because before all of your science communication stuff, you had what some people would call a real job. Tell us about how you got your start in science.
I had a real job. I'm like, when was that?
Yeah.
I worked at a head shop when I was 16. I remember that. Do you guys use that phrase, head shop?
Head shop.
Do you know what that is?
Like a hairdresser's?
No, that's like a head shop in the U.S. is like where they sell bongs.
What?
like drug paraphernalia.
We call that. What do we call that, Catz, over here?
A bong shop? I don't know. I don't think
because in a lot of states in the U.S., marijuana is still illegal, so we wouldn't call it a bong shop because a bong is illegal.
Okay.
So they call them water pipes, and they say that for tobacco use only.
Oh, I see.
Whatever.
Well, it's illegal here as well, I think. And
you're right.
We just don't
in California,
care.
we blew past that. So, but I grew up in Texas.
Okay.
Grew up in Texas. Kind of did the standard. Went to school. Was having fun with my friends. Flunking out of classes, not knowing what I wanted to focus on. Honestly, studied psychology because it sounded easy. I started as a vocal jazz major. I was a singer all through high school, and very quickly realized that all of the piano and theory classes sucked all the fun out of music for me. And so, I stumbled into psychology. I thought it would be an easy major. And in psychology, I discovered my love for neuroscience and neurobiology, decided to stick around, got a master's in neuroscience, started a PhD, ended up kind of through a lot of twists and turns in life, getting the opportunity to do some public communication because I had been teaching quite a lot, and actually left my PhD, that was in New York City, to come out to LA while I was in LA, I got some jobs on air and decided to kind of ride that wave for a while, knowing that it would probably dry up eventually. But I've been very lucky in that it's really made a career for me.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I did decide I wanted to go back to school. And so 4 years ago now, more than 4 years ago, I went back to restart a PhD, this time in clinical psychology. So I'm starting my 5th year of the PhD program now, finished with all my coursework,
Nice.
Finishing up my clinical hours, and now I'm diving deep into the dissertation process.
Yeah.
So, gosh, on top of doing a daily TV show,
I said
2.5 podcasts.
I said before we started that I'd like your schedule, but now I'm thinking no, I don't think I would. No. Amazing, Catz. She says, I decided to stick around and I got a master's. It was just easy as that. Just stuck around, got the master's. Easy.
As you do, yeah.
As you do. You're like Catz. He's a bit of a musical man, aren't you, Catz?
Oh, yeah, I play, but I'm not. I'm not. Jazz. You mentioned jazz. Like jazz is really complicated, isn't it? Like the music theory behind jazz just blows my mind. So yeah.
Me too. I mean, it's been so long now. I was really in it when I was, a teenager, and I think I just had more brain power back then. But now I just sing in the shower. That's like the extent of my professional.
Nice. Well, Catz writes songs, don't you, Catz? You write songs all the time.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, you wouldn't say that if you heard them. Yeah, if you can call them songs, parody songs, yeah.
Oh,
but,
they are good, mate. Come on, give yourself some credit. So you mentioned there, you had a few correspondent roles, didn't you? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so, when I first started doing science communication, I mostly was just requested, news organizations and things might request me to come on to talk about something that's big in the news.
Yeah.
So, you don't really get paid for those spots. A lot of people do them to promote their books or whatever. I had no books to promote. So I was just kind of going on TV randomly and getting my legs. And then eventually that did evolve into some actual good career work. So for about a year and a half, I think one of my really first gigs was that I was the science correspondent for the Huffington Post way back when they didn't have a science page and their science was abysmal and embarrassing. And, Deepak Chopra was labeled as a science writer there. And so they wanted to completely restructure and build out a science page that was really about evidence-based journalism. And so I kind of was involved in building out that vertical and doing a show for them that was Talk Nerdy to Me, which ultimately became my podcast, Talk Nerdy. After that, I had, quite a few really great roles. I'd say most of my work has probably been with National Geographic. They've been a really good home to me. So I worked on a show called Explorer. Yeah. I did a show called Brain Games. I've done a few one-offs like Brain Surgery Live. Don't worry, I didn't do the brain surgery. So it's been really fun because I've had the opportunity to really travel the world. Doing on-camera science communication and journalism.
Yeah. Is the TV stuff quite nervous? Do you get nervous? Is it nervous every time, or are you used to it now?
I don't get nervous for the TV stuff.
I feel like I'd be really nervous.
A lot of it is just about getting used to the weirdness of the fact that the camera's in your face and the fact that the audience isn't actually there. They're behind the lens, and the kind of vibe of the set or of the crew. Field work is different than work on set. I've done both kinds of jobs a lot. I've done jobs where I'm on teleprompter. That's probably the most nerve-wracking because you really have to focus so that you don't flub, especially when you're doing live TV. But ultimately, I still get the most nervous, honestly. If I were asked to sing on stage, I would poop my pants right before. That would make me the most nervous. But beyond that, I don't know. The more you do it, the easier I think it tends to get.
I'd get nervous about that as well, singing on stage, because mainly because I'm a terrible singer. But my wife's worse though, so it's okay.
Good. It's always good to have that.
Now, of course, I know you from. Mainly from the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, the podcast. How did that project come about? Because the whole thing was an entity before the podcast, wasn't it?
Oh, for sure. So the Skeptics Guide, I think, was really born from the three brothers, Steve,
Yeah.
Bob, and Jay, and their work early on in skeptical activism, where they live in New England. So they're all from Connecticut, and they live in different towns in Connecticut. And of course, their best friend Evan is also local to their area. And back then, their friend Perry DeAngelis. And so they were doing skeptical activism work, which I think ultimately led to Nexus, the New England Conference on Science and Skepticism, New England Skeptics Society, and all this local activism. And they were one of the earliest adopters of podcasting. Has it been 16 years? It's something bananas.
Yeah,
that
it's
they've
something,
been on air.
when I looked it up, it was quite a long time.
A really long time. They're one of the oldest podcasts. And so they started it. Perry unfortunately passed away pretty soon after. They continued on. They started working with Rebecca Watson as their fifth rogue. Ultimately, she ended up leaving to move on to other things. They spent a while, just the four of them again. And I think that they had decided we need, another perspective on the show.
Yeah.
They knew of my work and they invited me, unbeknownst to me, to like guest on the show. I just thought I was coming on as a guest, like I'm coming on, as a guest on your show.
Yeah.
I think we might have done that a couple of times. And then they reached out and sort of extended the offer, like, hey, we'd love for you to do this full time. This is what it would entail. And we worked out all the logistics. It's, it's a little more complicated because I live on the other side of the country from them.
Yeah.
And it very quickly became a very kind of familial vibe. So I feel like I've known them my whole lives, but it's definitely different being of a different generation, a different gender, a different geographic location. But we work it out. We still do the show every week. I'm going to record just a couple hours after you guys and I hang up. And we do live events. We do the skeptical extravaganza of some significance. We're finally getting back on. COVID, put a damper on that for a while, but I think our first show back is in Denver, Colorado in November. And we have a lot of fun together.
Yeah, it is massive, isn't it? The Skeptics Guide.
It's big. I mean, we're trying to grow it too.
Yeah.
We've written, we wrote one book. The guys are working on a second book. I might be working on a third book with, we're trying to break it up so we're not all doing all the work every time. But yeah, I think that's the idea, is that not everybody listens to podcasts. Is there a way that we can reach people through different avenues?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm always encouraged to see the growth of these sorts of people and organizations. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now you've got the Talk Nerdy podcast, of course, where you talk to really interesting people about all manner of things. And that podcast is all yours, I guess. Was it your brainchild, so to speak?
Yeah, so I started Talk Nerdy before I came to SGU. Granted, SGU is older, but they invited me to join them on the show about a year into my work on Talk Nerdy. So when I started Talk Nerdy, I was actually working on a television show. It was a live daily show called Take Part Live, and it was sucking the life out of me. And long story short, because I've talked about this in other places, excuse me, I was working on this TV show and I had a very bad experience with a very, very sexist showrunner, a co-executive producer, the guy who was like, in charge of the thing in the day-to-day. I didn't realize it was a bad experience. I mean, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize what was going on because it was one of those very classic gaslighting experiences where he was kind of knocking me down a lot, kind of telling me that the crew didn't like me, telling me that my co-host didn't like me, taking kind of responsibility away from me. And I was really second guessing my abilities and thinking I wasn't very good at my job. Ultimately, through therapy and through really communing with my crew and the people that I worked with on the show, I began to understand that the problem wasn't me, it was him. But for a while, it kind of messed me up. And so at that time, I was lucky enough to have gone on a bunch of other people's podcasts.
Yeah.
And I actually went on Joe Rogan's show and he was like, Cara, you should just start a podcast. It's amazing. You're your own boss. You're your own producer. Nobody tells you what to do or what to say. Because, he had done a lot of television and had dealt with some of his own issues. And I did. And I mean, I don't think I would have had the success that I had if I hadn't been on Rogan, because he was like live in front of his insane audience. Yeah. Hey guys, would you listen to the show? If so, like hit her up. So my first episode, I had so many downloads and people were reaching out to me on social media and it helped kind of catapult that. Obviously, it damped down over time. And now I've got this kind of core listenership. It's much smaller than it was when it was promoted by by Joe, but it's also a core listenership of true, I think, scientific skeptics, people who are fascinated by the scientific process. And as you mentioned, that's what I do. I interview different scientists and science writers every week about their work. And so it runs the gamut from astrophysicists to, chemists to neurobiologists and everything in between.
What interesting what you say that. I don't know how you feel about your channel, Catz, but my channel specifically as well, there is a core of people who watch you, and you get to know them in the comments and stuff. And yes, you've got a lot of people that follow you, but you always recognise this core that are always there. I don't know if it's that same with you, Catz, or your channel.
It is, and I look sometimes, I see people who were there 3 years ago, you know, when I started, and it's almost like it kind of goes a little bit beyond the subject matter. They're just interested in being part of the community that you've built, not necessarily, me as a personal user, but like there's a community there, and they interact with other people in the comment section as well, which is it's nice. It's nice to get that, and they'll follow you from one platform to another, whether you're doing your normal stuff or something different. It's good to have that.
Cara,
it's really validating, I think,
absolutely.
And I think, one of the, if I were to comb through negative comments, other than the stuff that's just overtly sexist for the sake of being sexist, one of the things that some people say about my show is like, Cara, talks a lot about her own work. She's very, it's very kind of in her interviews, it's very 50-50 as opposed to it being all about the guest. And for a handful of people who don't know the show, that like bothers them. They're like, I want to know what's going on only with your guest. And I'm like, yeah, but this is my show.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, you can do that in other places. But I think my core audience, they like that because they're following my work and they're kind of growing along with me. And they're seeing how I've shifted from doing just sort of skeptical activism to now becoming a more competent psychotherapist. And, I went from being just ultimately interested in neuroscience to now specializing in like end of life issue. Like it's a completely different field. And I've made this big turn into existential psychology. And I feel like a lot of my kind of core audience has been along for that ride and has been really supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go, Catz. I've got the green light to talk about myself for a bit now. I kind of blew up with a video of a guy trying to prove flat earth for the gate. That's kind of how I became quite big. And a lot of the people that watch that video, all they're interested in now is, when's the next guy who's got a gate with a trying to prove flat earth? I know I'm not interested in your podcast. I'm not interested in this. When's the gate guy back?
Yeah.
Bless him. Right. So, I mean, you mentioned it there. You've worked with some incredible science communicators over the years. I want to know, who's the best person you've worked with? And more importantly, who, in your opinion, would be worthy enough to appear on the SciManDan podcast like yourself?
Gosh, the best, that's so hard because there's so many. And the truth is, I feel like a lot of the best ones that I've worked with are names that people might not recognize because we all know the big names. And I've worked, I did Bill Nye Saves the World. That was his TV show on Netflix. I was a correspondent for him. I've worked obviously with Neil deGrasse Tyson, for years and years and years. And he's been a mentor to me. But really, I think some of the best people that I've communicated with, that I've interviewed, that I've worked with are people who you may not know. They're, it's a professor who's in her lab working on plastic pollution or working on, preventive cancer research or trying to understand climate change through studying shark teeth. Yeah. And some of these people are, I think, some of the best communicators out there. They have some of the most compelling stories, and I've learned the most from them. I cite them oftentimes, but I usually, unfortunately, they don't have the kind of name recognition. And so I think really for what I recommend for people who are interested in, like, they've never heard my show, but they want to hear about some of these people, is to just scroll through the titles of the different episodes. Way back in the day, back when like the algorithms and Apple Podcasts didn't care, we would name our episodes just numbers, right? It was like episode 3, and then I might put the person's name. Yeah. And people were like, I don't know who the hell that is. Like, I don't know what. And so we painstakingly went through recently and renamed every episode. So now it'll be like the end of the world with so-and-so, or hummingbirds with so-and-so. And so in doing that, you can see what we talk about, but it's always so much more than that too. Even I think if you're like, I don't know if I'm all that interested in evolutionary theory or something, so much is there that you don't even realize is interesting.
100%. And because we had a little episode where Catz and I talked about some of the guests we had on, and we've had some pretty big names. We've had Jim Al-Khalili, haven't we? And Chris Lintop from The Sky at Night. But some of our favourite episodes were, like you say, people who aren't that well known. There was a lady called Abby Richards. She made a conspiracy chart, which was fascinating, wasn't it, Catz? Like a pyramid of different conspiracies. I spoke to a guy called Michael Butter. He wrote a book on conspiracies, the conspiracy theories. You're absolutely right. Some of the more interesting podcasts are these people that definitely need more recognition.
I agree. And if you are interested in those specific topics, right, because you're listening to this show and you listen to it for that sort of skeptical bent, that like debunking things like conspiracy theories or flat earth or things like that, I do have a nice sampling of that on my show too. It's not the primary focus of my show, but periodically I will interview people. And I think one that comes to mind right now is this wonderful professor named Dr. Ashley Landrum, who randomly, the reason she was on my show, to be honest, we went to high school together.
Wow.
And I was at the AAAS conference, which is the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, I think, or something. I don't know. Ooh, I might be wrong with that. But anyway, I'm at this conference. We're doing the podcast stage with SGU, and she's there and she watches. And then she's like, Cara, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in so long. Let's catch up. And it turns out she's now a professor, a psychology professor who specializes in why people believe in things like conspiracies. Wow. And she has done all this great published work in the area of flat earthers. And so I had her on my show to talk about it from an academic perspective, and it was just fascinating.
That's it. But we've been talking ages, haven't we, Catz, about getting someone on for a psychology basis on why these people believe that. So maybe you're going to have to hook us up there.
Yeah, I think she would be great for your show, for sure.
Perfect. Right, we're going to have a short break. We've got a section here called Cat's Curiosity. This is where Catz brings us a piece of science news from the week just gone. What have you got, buddy?
Well, I was scrolling through the science pages this week, and a little bit of trivia caught my eye. So rather than a piece of news from the week, I thought I'd find just some more little bits of trivia and just see whether you knew them. Right? And this is where I show my ignorance, because there's 10 facts here, and every fact I'm going to give you, I didn't know. All right, so we'll see how many of these you actually knew, and how like the gap, like how dumb I am compared to you guys.
It's not going to be a quiz like you did with FTFE that lasted about 15 minutes, is it?
It's not. You just tell me whether you knew it.
All right.
Yeah, that one went downhill.
Go on then.
Okay, so this is a fact I saw. They're all animal related.
Okay.
I did not know that female ferrets, when they come into season, if they don't find a mate, can die. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No.
Apparently, when they're in season, the hormone changes that occur suppress the production of red blood cells, and that can lead to death.
Wow.
So, number one.
Okay.
Number two, there are, per human on the planet, 1 million ants. 1 million per human.
I think I've heard something similar to that before. Yeah.
I knew there'd be a lot.
Thank E.O. Wilson for that.
Who, sorry?
E.O. Wilson. He's the ant guy. And
there you go.
Yeah, he's an incredible writer. Just highly recommend. But yes.
Mate, there's about 1 million in my garden, so I definitely knew that was right.
Bats, apparently, obviously, we all know the insects, but did you know that they can actually eat up to 1,000 an hour?
1,000 insects? No.
1,000 an hour.
Shut up.
Apparently, apparently it's true.
I'm not buying that one.
This is a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the study with chimpanzees, gorillas, sorry, and how they can actually speak to each other and individually call out. Well, apparently dolphins can do the same. They can call each other by name with their whistles. Scientists have recreated it. Cara, is that one you know?
No, but it doesn't surprise me.
No, they're clever,
Dolphins
aren't they?
Awesome.
They're clever.
Yeah, really, really good.
Have you ever cuddled one before?
Cuddled a
dolphin?
No, I don't recommend.
Wow, they are honestly, they're pure muscle.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Sorry, mate, disrupt you mid-flow there.
Apparently they're quite playful. Well, obviously we know they're quite playful, but one of the things they did, which I didn't know, is they deliberately hassle pufferfish, because the toxins pufferfish release are narcotic and they cause hallucinogenic effects to the dolphin, so they get high off the toxin. Yeah,
there's a lot of really good evidence available that many animals, quote, do drugs in the wild.
Wow,
it's fascinating to me. I thought it was brilliant.
Incredible.
Some other ones, I'll rattle through these now, but a panda, when it's born, is smaller than a mouse, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that. Didn't know that.
Quite tiny. Now, this one I liked. I'll only give you two more. A cockroach's head when you chop, not that I've done it, but if you chop the head off a cockroach, the head will survive for hours after being cut off, for hours. But the body could survive for weeks.
Weeks?
It just runs around without a head?
Well, I don't know. I did find the citation for it and I've lost. I had all the citations and I forgot to email them with the points. I'm just looking at the emails.
Yeah, he's making these up. Come on.
The last one, right, that I'll give you, the Dracula ant, right? So the Dracula ant has the fastest known movement of all. It's not the fastest animal, it's got the fastest known movement of all animals. When it closes its mandibles, it goes from 0 to 200 miles per hour in 0.000015 seconds, which is an acceleration of nearly 6 million meters per second.
I actually did know that because I once did a video called the top 5 fastest animals in the world, and it was number 1. I did know that.
It's quick, isn't it?
Yeah,
quick.
yeah. I had a video of it, and they slowed it down, and it's like a really quick, like almost like a bear trap closing. Yeah. Well done,
there
mate.
we go.
Thanks for that. That's, so, every day's a school day. We're learning as we listen. Incredible stuff. Right, so, Cara, Catz and I, we're kind of like the Skeptics Guide to the Universe of YouTube. We combat a lot of the conspiracy theories floating around. How successful would you say the Skeptics Guide has been in promoting skeptical thinking and showing people how to spot that sort of stuff?
Right. I have no idea what metric I would possibly use.
It's tough, isn't it? It kind of ties into another question, which is like, how much have people come up to you and said, "Oh, you've really helped me"?
Right.
How have you had much of that sort of stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we get so many emails a day, and we, try to read them all. Recommend if you're going to send an email, don't make it 10 pages long. I'm less likely to read that kind of email. But yeah, we get tons of emails all the time. And the ones that are obviously the most meaningful to us are the ones that are like, I grew up in this household and I was never vaccinated as a child. And the minute I turned 18, because of listening to you, I went out and I was able to make sure that I was protecting myself. Or, I used to believe in whatever. And then I slowly kind of came to understand that that was, pseudoscience or whatever. And it really changed my life. And, these are, I love the ones where it's like, you inspired me to go to school and study something or, to really focus my attention on some big scientific problem that I'm trying to solve. So I do think, at the individual level, we see a lot of change. My hope is that at the societal level, collectively, so it's not just the SGU, it's not just Talk Nerdy, it's not just the work that I do, but that collectively as a movement, we are moving the needle. I think my concern is that the people that are in positions of political power and who have had a voice for quite some time have really shifted the zeitgeist in a direction that's quite dangerous. And I'm not saying we haven't been here before, and I'm not saying that there haven't been very good examples of time when we overcame, but I do think that societally we're in a different place than at least I was when I started this work. And I think that the guys would agree with that because they started this work, longer ago.
I'd agree with that as well.
And that's a big kind of Sisyphean task to fight against this sort of era of fake news, era of a lack of respect for scientific authority, a lack of understanding of critical thinking. I mean, these are big hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, that's a good one. The lack of the respect of the scientific authority, definitely. And you mentioned it's good getting the ones that people say, "Oh, I've gone to study this and study that because of what." I've had some lovely ones over the last year, especially of people who are in having really difficult times. They're really struggling because of the pandemic. And it's just a thanks, just to say, look, your videos have been there and helped me, get through this year. And those are the ones where you just think, you know what, I was having a bad week this week. I didn't think I was doing as well as I was. And you get those sort of emails, you think it's definitely worth it, 100%.
I agree. And, because of my shift too from neuroscience as a more wet lab approach, like I used to work with mice and birds, and now I do psychotherapy with people. And my dissertation is about medical aid in dying and the experience of electing to utilize medical aid in dying. I work with a lot of people who have cancer, people who are dealing with end of life issues. And so for me, when I get the feedback that has a more mental health perspective, like I was in a bad way and this kept me okay, or because of you and your openness to reduce the stigma around your own experience with depression or with your patients or whatever, I finally went out and I saw somebody. I finally went out and I got medicated. These are the kinds of things that to me give me all the feels because they're so fundamentally beneficent. They really fundamentally, I think, affect people's lives. And yes, I do think coming around to the scientific method is earth-shattering. It's paradigm shifting, but getting yourself out of some of your darkest moments so that you can see the light is kind of the first step for many people to being able to really kind of suck the marrow out of life.
Absolutely. And some of those people aren't even necessarily, conspiratorial mindset. They might just be having a bad year or whatever.
Yeah. Some people are already, they're already skeptics. They're already into this stuff, but then they also got to hear, some conversation about mental health and say, maybe I need to take a look at myself and maybe it's time. Yeah. And then their lives are changed. I mean, I had the same experience when I finally went on medication and I was like, oh my God, I could have felt like this decade ago, like, why did I wait so long? And I hear that, that kind of reiterated quite often. And I think those are the ones that affect me the most.
Absolutely. What about you, Catz? Do you get much of those sorts of messages?
Not a great deal. I get a lot of messages, people throwing me links, take a look at this, take a look at that, but that tends to be the main ones.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, as we've talked, flat Earth is our bread and butter. Catz and I, we work on it all the time. How much of experience have you had with those guys?
I mean, direct experience, almost none. Obviously, I've watched the documentaries and I've, read a lot of the literature. Like I said, I had Dr. Landrum on to talk about her experience going to like flat Earth conferences and interviewing some of these people and then doing some psychology work in that area. And we've obviously talked about it on the Skeptics Guide quite a bit. I do think it's important, clearly. I think that the work to try and understand the motivations of people who are down a rabbit hole, like QAnon conspiracy theorists, like flat earthers, and I think also similarly to QAnon, people who kind of believe in this new world order, and that underlies a lot of these more kind of politically motivated conspiracy theories, like the Alex Jones type conspiracy theories. I think it's fundamentally important to understand how people can fall into those traps. And I think who the powers that be who are pushing the propaganda and what their motivation really is. But I tend to be the person on the show who doesn't focus as much on what I would consider more like fringe pseudoscience, the Bigfoots of the world. Like the guys are really into this. And I think that's how the SGU was started. And Evan still often you'll hear him doing stories on that on the show. Yeah. But I tend to look at like very, very mainstream, like poor, or ineffective or what's the word I'm looking for? Like science journalism that doesn't actually capture and might be misleading, or understanding why it is that climate denial exists, like things that are much more kind of to the core of evidence-based policy. So because I think they're all connected, and I think understanding why people believe in flat Earth helps us understand why people don't believe in climate change, because they are really connected. But I think I find myself more compelled to focus on something like climate change because I find it to be more of an existential threat to me.
Oh, completely. Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense, but I'm just picturing the flat Earthers now listening going, did she just call us fringe?
Exactly. I mean, and I think that's so you have a lot of flat earthers who actually listen to your show.
Well, there's certainly a lot that watch the YouTube channel, definitely.
So I'm about to get some hate mail.
You can tell by the comments that we get on our channel that they definitely watch. I mean, you mentioned you said your friend went to one of the conferences. How did she find that?
I think that I think she knew what she was walking into. She had done her research, and so she didn't go in like overwhelmed or surprised. I think she really knew what the core beliefs were, and she was just, again, more interested in the psychological perspective of how do people get to the place where this is what they believe? What are their motivations? Is this just about cognitive dissonance? Is this just about, you know, confirmation bias and all these core psychological biases that we study? I tend to take the view that I'm less interested in how do I word this? For example, last night I was taking a break from working on my dissertation, and I was watching I think it's an HBO documentary or Cinemax documentary about the Heaven's Gate cult.
Okay.
And, you know, this was the one, I don't know if you guys followed this, that thought they were going to go to heaven on Hale-Bopp's comet. They were going to leave their earthly bodies behind, and they engaged in a mass death by suicide in the 90s. And this cult had been around since the 70s. And it really followed the motivations and the understandings of the people. And this was quite a sad case, because I do think there was some delusion in the leader, and ultimately it was just this cult mentality that kind of perpetuated itself. But when we look at some of these larger conspiracies, like climate denial, like anti-vax rhetoric, we do find that the core, it's not so much the people that believe in them, but the people that are pushing the rhetoric have a motivation. Often it's a financial motivation or a political power motivation. And I'm really interested in exposing and uncovering that agenda from those nefarious actors than I am blaming the victims, who often fall into their trap because it solves a problem for them, whether it makes the world a less complicated place, whether it gives them hope during a time of despair and suffering. You know, that to me is much easier to understand, but the nefarious kind of pushes that are based on greed and power and money are the things that really boil my blood.
I think we can really appreciate that, because we've talked about that before, Catz and I, and whenever we address videos by flat earthers, we always say we're addressing the audience of these people. We're not trying to change the mind of the people doing the videos. We're addressing the audience who may or may not be on the fence, or you know, they've been interested in a while or whatever. Because we know we're not going to change the minds of the people making the videos, because they're in it for, like you say, financial notoriety, whatever. It's just interesting. I mean, I mentioned the conferences because Catz and I are like public enemy number 1 and 2 for flat earthers. I just wonder what would happen if you and I, Catz, showed up at a conference. What would go down?
So you haven't done it yet? You haven't gone and...
There's only been one in the UK.
Okay.
And that was in the Midlands, wasn't it, Catz, somewhere?
I think only about, what was it, 6 people turned up?
Yeah, not many people turned up. So, I mean, if we went anywhere, it would have to be an American one, I think, if we went, because that's, you know, the Mark Sargents, your Hector Bays, even though they all don't get on.
We're the ones housing all of the insanity.
Oh, it would be so much fun.
I don't think I would enjoy it. So because I've been doing journalism for so long, there is always a component that I find myself, not always, but periodically I'll find myself, especially when I was doing early days of brain games and things like that, where you have to do these quote unquote person on the street interviews, and you have to just grab people and ask them questions. And I hate those things. They make me so uncomfortable. I feel like it's the opposite of informed consent. It's everything I don't do as a therapist.
I'll be the same.
And so often I rely on my producers to be like, you need to pre-screen or go pull or whatever. I'm not just going to walk up to somebody and start talking to them. That sort of gotcha journalism makes me brutally uncomfortable. So I don't think I would enjoy going to a conference and being like, ha ha, you know, what do you have to say about that? I would be like hiding in the corner.
Oh, well, we've spent the best part of 3 years now combating these guys, and they know us very well. And I don't think they'd let us in the door.
Yeah, maybe not. You'd have to wear like the glasses with the mustache.
Yeah. Oh, that is a brilliant idea. That would make a great... Right, Catz, we're going undercover at a Flat Earth conference in disguise. It's happening.
I'll grow my hair.
It's happening.
People don't think I can, but I'll grow it. I'll have it neck length.
Oh, that is a great... Why have I never thought of that before? That's a great idea. That would make a great video. Oh, dear.
Brilliant.
We're doing it. I mean, you talked about the mainstream stuff there. Do you think as the years have gone by that the amount of misinformation out there is increasing and becoming more accessible?
Well, accessibility, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think there's always been misinformation. The problem is that the pockets of individuals who attached to it or the individuals that are spewing it, they've always had a limit in how many people they could reach, right? Pre-internet, obviously you could reach people through literature and through publication. The internet obviously completely changed the game. So now, and as the internet evolved, you know, going from early chat rooms where only people who had the savvy to like log into IRC and find those sort of chat rooms and find their people. And then it became 4chan and 8chan and Reddit and, you know, all of these different places. And now, I mean, there are like Facebook, like mainstream social media outlets have groups dedicated with thousands of members. And I think that's part of the problem, is that if anything is uniquely anti-normative, and oftentimes that can be a very good thing because people with unique interests get to find each other. But when there's distrust in consensus, and I think that's the really hard part. I get it when people have an anti-establishmentarianism kind of stance. I get it when people are afraid of authority. There's enough historical reason for that, especially in marginalized groups, especially in countries that have had authoritarian governments, or countries in which it's sort of a part of the ethos of the people to be inherently, you know, distrustful of that. And I get it. I have that streak. I think it's what helps me be a good skeptic and scientist. But what ends up happening is when you actually start to question consensus and question expertise and believe that there's some sort of nefarious underbelly, some sort of gross conspiracy in which all of these experts have decided to holistically dupe everybody else. But your own research, you know, your own Google skills are more compelling and more based in fact than somebody who spent 30 years in a field publishing among their peers. That's when things start to become really problematic. And I think that specific type of rhetoric didn't exist before the internet. No. You had the town crank, sure, or you had the person who was writing their own manifestos, but you didn't have the ability for those individuals to find like-minded people and then to sort of have this negative feedback loop where it grows and grows and grows. And also this ability that we see in cult, in kind of cult science and cult sociology, where there's a systematic disconnect from greater society. So cutting off ties with family members, cutting off ties, you know, only looking at certain news sources and really saying, you know, that is other, that is dangerous. So we're only going to look at our own literature. That's, I think, where things start to really spin out of control. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. The do your own research crowd are massive now. And I focused on a guy here in the UK who was anti-COVID vaccine, wrote to his MP, tried to get his MP criminally charged, went to Westminster, did like a speech at Westminster on the day that we kind of dropped all the lockdown restrictions. And when I checked him out on Facebook, his Facebook page had 22,000 followers. And the overall emotion I got was sadness, because that's 22,000 people who are following this guy. And like you say, his Google skills, his research skills are apparently better than all the experts out there. And like I say, it was just sadness, really, because, you know, I wanted to feel angry, but 22,000 people.
No, it's just, it's bananas. I mean, we just had this massive IPCC report come out. It's what I'm going to be, you know, reporting on the SGU later today. And I'm posting all about it. So on my social media, especially my Twitter and my Facebook, I'm much more engaged in Twitter because Facebook, gosh. But there's just something, Twitter suits me better. But I share 5 different science stories a day, every day. I don't get paid for this. I do this as part of kind of my own activism work, that I want to just put out what I think is good science reporting so that people can stay updated on what's interesting, what's happening in the world. You know, not stuff I write. I pull from a feed reader. And so today I'm really focused on IPC today and tomorrow, because so many people have done really good write-ups and I want to share them all. And the feedback on some of these posts, you know, there's the feedback that I'm totally agreeing with and that I'm I'm feeling all the feels about like, man, my climate anxiety is, through the roof today. It's like, yeah, I feel you, you know, and this is a legitimate concern. But then I'm getting kind of just some really wacky responses that are just, steeped in denialism. And it's like, how, this is literally thousands of reports.
Yeah.
And hundreds of scientists working together to say, let's comb through all of the research. Let's look at every single outcome measure. And let's say, okay, this kind of contradicts this. So maybe we'll take those away, but we'll only look at the ones that are really solid, where we've got a lot of reinforcing literature and evidence. And once we get to the core of that, we're going to publish what they say, what these models look like, and what we're facing in the future. And people go, nah, don't buy it. It's like, what more? At a certain point, it's like, what more do you need? Nothing. You can't just give somebody more information and hope that that will change their mind, because their head is already full of misinformation.
It's gone. Yeah. It certainly is a worry, that the amount of people that are like that, definitely. And as I said, we'd be very, very keen to talk more about the psychology of it all, and how these people get into these sorts of headspaces. But let's lighten the mood a little bit. We're going to play the scientist game. So this is a game. It's a brand new game. You're lucky you're not playing Guess the Conspiracy. This was our old game. That's where Catz and I created a conspiracy, and there was a real one in there, and you had to guess the real one. Not anymore.
Oof, I feel like I'd be better at that.
You probably would be good at that, but now you're facing off against Catz. It's you versus Catz. Now, he's 2-1 up. So what happens is, I will start reading some facts about a scientist in chronological order, and the first person to correctly guess the scientist wins the point. Happy?
I'm going to be so bad at this.
Well, I don't know. I think you might be good at this one. So Catz is 2-1 up. So please don't lose and let him get big-headed.
Okay.
So I'm now going to play my cool music, which I completely didn't play last week. Here we go. Okay. First fact. Born in 1941 in Nairobi, Kenya. Moved to England in 1949. Obtained a bachelor's in zoology in 1962. Obtained a master's and doctorate in zoology in 1966. These were both from Oxford. Returned to Oxford to lecture biology in 1970. In 1976, published his first book, The Selfish Gene.
Oh, Richard Dawkins.
Oh, she's got it. She's got it. Well done. Well done.
Dawkins was born in Nairobi?
Yeah.
That threw me, that.
I thought that was going to give that away straight away. I was like, born in Nairobi. Who knows someone that's born in Nairobi and moved to England? Has to be Dawkins. I thought you'd get us.
And of course, my bias was that he was actually, Kenyan.
Yeah.
Not just that he was colonial. And so I was this whole time thinking of a black scientist.
Well, there you go.
And so then Selfish Gene.
There you go. Yeah, Selfish Genes. You were just quick off the mark. 2-2. Oh, mate, come on.
I would have just another second and a half.
Another second, you'd have got it. Yeah.
I'm getting, in my old age, my reactions are getting there. Just slowing down. I'm going to blame it on that. Brilliant. Well done.
Well done. Congratulations to all. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I say this all the time, but honestly, we could carry on talking about this sort of stuff for a long, long, long time. Yeah. We can find you. So we'll put everything in your link in the description, but your Twitter is...
My name, at Cara Santa Maria.
Perfect. Please, everyone, check out the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. It is brilliant, as well as the Talk Nerdy podcast. That's it. We're done. Next week, Catz, we have got one half of the Infinite Monkey Cage presenting team, Mr. Robin Ince. So that should be a good one.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, should be fun, because he was a comedian first, wasn't he? Did you know he's in The Office? Did you know that?
I did not know he was in The Office.
He was in The Office. Yeah. Right. We'll talk more about that, but don't worry. Anyway, we're done. Have a great week. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.